It was a quiet Saturday night. The kind of night where everything feels calm and nice. I was in my backyard, just sitting there by my little fire pit. The fire was small, but it was warm. The flames were dancing, popping, and crackling like they were telling me a story. Little bits of wood snapped and sent tiny sparks up into the air. I watched them float for a second before they disappeared. Above me, the sky was dark and full of stars. Tons of them. They twinkled like little lights, making the night feel special. I leaned back in my chair, feeling good. I wasn't doing anything big or fancy, just chilling. That's all I wanted. A quiet night with my fire pit. My backyard isn't huge, but it's mine. I've got a wooden fence around it, tall enough to keep things private. There's a big tree in one corner, and its branches hang over a little, making shadows on the ground. The grass is soft, and I keep it cut short because I like how it feels under my feet. My fire pit sits right in the middle, a round thing made of bricks I stacked up myself. It's not perfect, but it works. I had a pile of sticks and logs next to it, ready to toss in when the fire got low. That night, I was happy. Everything was peaceful. The air smelled like wood smoke, and a cool breeze brushed my face every now and then. I thought, this is perfect. Most people in my neighborhood are pretty nice. They're the kind of folks who wave when they see you or say hi if you pass them on the street. There's Mr. Jenkins, who lives 2 houses down. He's old and always watering his flowers. He smiles a lot and sometimes gives me a nod when I'm outside. Then there's the Carter family across the street. They've got 2 kids who ride bikes up and down the sidewalk all the time. They're loud sometimes, but it's a fun kind of loud. Everyone around here gets along okay. They don't bother me, and I don't bother them. We all just do our own thing. That's how I like it. But then there's Karen. Oh boy, Karen's not like the others. Not even close. She lives in the house right next to mine. Her place is so close that I can see her kitchen window from my backyard. Our fences touch, and sometimes I hear her yelling about something when I'm outside. Karen's the kind of person who notices everything. And I mean everything. If someone parks their car a little crooked, she's out there complaining. If a dog barks too loud, she's knocking on doors. She's got short hair that's always perfect, and she wears these big sunglasses even when it's not sunny. She walks around like she's in charge of the whole street. Everyone knows her because she's loud. Really loud. Karen loves rules. She's part of the HOA, that's the group that makes rules for the neighborhood. They decide stuff like how tall your grass can be or what color you can paint your house. Most people don't care too much about the HOA, but Karen? She acts like it's her job to make sure we all follow every single rule. She's always carrying around a little notebook, scribbling things down. I've seen her measuring people's mailboxes with a ruler before. Who does that? She's the lady who knocks on your door if your trash can is out 5 minutes too long. She's nosy, bossy, and she'd say proud of it. That night, though, I wasn't thinking about Karen at first. I was just enjoying my fire pit. I'd spent all week working hard, and this was my time to relax. I had a soda in my hand, cold and fizzy, and I took a sip every now and then. The fire was glowing orange and yellow, and it made my yard feel cozy. I tossed another stick in, and the flames jumped up a little higher. I smiled. This was my spot, my night. Nothing was gonna ruin it. Or so I thought. See, most people in the neighborhood didn't mind my fire pit. Mr. Jenkins even told me once he liked the smell of the smoke, it reminded him of camping when he was a kid. The Carter kids thought it was cool and asked if they could roast marshmallows sometime. I said sure, why not? It's just a little fire, right? Nothing crazy. I checked the rules before I built it, too. The HOA says you can have a fire pit as long as it's not too big and you keep it safe. Mine was small, and I had a bucket of water nearby just in case. I wasn't breaking any rules. I was sure of it. But Karen? She's not like most people. She doesn't just let things slide. If she sees something she doesn't like, she's on it like a hawk. And that night, she saw my fire pit. I didn't know it yet, but she was watching. Probably standing at her window, peeking through the curtains with that grumpy look she always has. I didn't hear her at first. I was too busy listening to the fire crackle and the crickets chirping all around. The night was so still, I could hear a car way off in the distance, its engine humming softly. Everything felt right. Then I heard her gate creak. You know that squeaky sound a gate makes when it swings open? That's what I heard. It was faint, but it was there. I turned my head a little, just enough to glance toward her yard. Nothing yet. Maybe it was the wind, I thought. But deep down, I knew better. Karen's gate doesn't open by itself. She was coming. I didn't see her right away, but I could feel it. Something was about to happen. My quiet night was about to get a whole lot louder. Now, here's the thing about Karen, everyone thought she was just annoying. They'd laugh about her behind her back, roll their eyes when she started complaining. There goes Karen again, they'd say. She was the loud lady with too many rules, the one who made a fuss over nothing. That's what they all thought. But I knew something they didn't. Something big. Something she didn't want anyone to find out. I wasn't just some guy sitting by a fire pit that night. Oh no. I had a secret about Karen, and it was a good one. A really good one. I didn't always know it. A week ago, I was just like everyone else, tired of her yelling, wishing she'd chill out. But then I saw something. Something she did when she thought no one was watching. It happened late one night, when I was checking my security camera. I've got this little camera by my back door. It's tiny, but it sees everything. I put it up because some packages went missing a while back, and I wanted to be safe. That night, I was looking at the video, just flipping through it to see if anything weird happened. And there she was. Karen. Doing something she shouldn't have been doing. I won't tell you what it was yet. Not right now. That's for later. But let's just say it was sneaky. Really sneaky. The kind of thing that could get her in big trouble if the right people found out. And guess what? I had it all on tape. Clear as day. She didn't know I'd seen it. She didn't know I had proof. To her, I was just the guy next door with a fire pit she didn't like. She thought she could boss me around like she bossed everyone else. But she was wrong. So wrong. That Saturday night, as I sat there by the fire, I wasn't worried. Not even a little. Karen could come over and yell all she wanted. She could wave her rulebook in my face or call whoever she felt like calling. I didn't care. Because I had something on her. Something that made me smile every time I thought about it. The flames flickered in front of me, and I leaned back in my chair, waiting. I knew she'd show up sooner or later. It was only a matter of time. So, what do you think? Was I just some guy with a fire pit, enjoying a quiet night? Or was there more going on? Was I ready for Karen, or was she about to surprise me? Stick around, because you're gonna love where this goes. This night wasn't just about a fire, it was about something way bigger. Something that would flip everything upside down. And trust me, it's worth waiting for. Karen stormed out of her house like she owned the whole street. Her front door slammed so loud it made me jump a little in my chair. I was still sitting by my fire pit, the flames crackling and popping in front of me. The night was dark, and the stars were shining, but now things were about to get noisy. I heard her feet stomping across her yard, crunching on the dry grass. She was coming fast, like a storm rolling in. Then she stopped right at the fence between our yards. It's a tall wooden fence, but I could see her head poking over the top. Her face was red, and her eyes were big and mad. "You can't have that fire," she yelled, pointing her finger at me over the fence. Her voice was loud and sharp, like a teacher scolding a kid who broke a rule. She waved her hand toward my fire pit, where the little flames were dancing. "It's against the rules." "I'm calling 911, she shouted. Her finger was shaking a little, like she was so mad she couldn't keep it still. I just looked at her, sitting there with my soda in my hand. The fire was warm on my face, and the smoke smelled good. I didn't yell back. I didn't even stand up. I just shrugged my shoulders and said, "Go ahead, Karen. It's my yard." That made her even madder. She glared at me like I'd kicked her dog or something. Her eyes got narrower, and her mouth turned into a tight little line. She looked like she wanted to jump over the fence and grab me. But she didn't. She just stood there, breathing hard, staring at me like I was the worst person in the world. I could see her hands clenching into fists at her sides. She was wearing a big green sweater and those giant sunglasses she always has, even though it was night. Her hair was short and stuck out a little, like she'd been running her hands through it. Karen was mad, really, really mad. She was always like this, though. Bossy. Rude. Thinking she could tell everyone what to do. Ever since I moved into this neighborhood, Karen's been the same. She's the lady who bangs on your door if your trash can isn't in the right spot. She's the one who yells at kids for riding bikes too fast. She's got a rule book from the HOA, the group that makes rules for our street, and she carries it around like it's a treasure map. She loves telling people they're wrong. That's not allowed, she'll say, waving her little book. You can't do that. It's like her favorite thing in the world. My other neighbors? They don't like her much. Mr. Jenkins, the old guy 2 houses down, rolls his eyes whenever she walks by. He told me once, that woman's got too much time on her hands. The Carter family across the street, they've got 2 kids who are always outside. They just laugh when Karen starts yelling. Here she goes again, Mrs. Carter will say, shaking her head. Everyone's used to her by now. They don't take her too seriously. She's loud, sure, but most people just tune her out. They let her complain and then go back to whatever they were doing. But me? I was different that night. I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't laugh. I stayed calm. Too calm, maybe. I just sat there by my fire pit, watching her yell. The flames were still going, flickering in the dark. I tossed another stick in, and it made a little pop. Karen flinched at the sound, like it was a bomb or something. See? That's dangerous, she snapped. You're gonna burn the whole neighborhood down. I didn't say anything back. I just took a sip of my soda and looked at her. My face didn't change. I wasn't mad. I wasn't scared. I was just calm. Why wasn't I worried? Well, here's the thing. I'd seen something about Karen. Something she didn't want anyone to know. Something big. It happened a week ago, late at night. I was checking my security camera, you know, the little one by my back door. I put it up because some packages got stolen a while back, and I wanted to keep an eye on things. That night, I was just looking at the video, flipping through it to see if anything weird happened. And then I saw her. Karen. She was sneaking around in the dark, doing something she shouldn't have been doing. I won't tell you what it was yet, that's a secret for later. But trust me, it was bad. Really bad. And I had it all on tape. She didn't know I'd seen it. She didn't know I had proof. To her, I was just the guy next door with a fire pit she didn't like. She thought she could yell at me and boss me around like she did with everyone else. But she was wrong. That night, as she stood there screaming about my fire, I wasn't scared of her. Not one bit. Because I knew something that could turn everything around. Something that was about to bite her. Hard. Karen kept going. I'm not kidding, she said, her voice getting louder. I'm calling the police right now. You'll see. She pulled her phone out of her pocket, a big, shiny one with a bright pink case. She held it up like it was a weapon, tapping the screen with her finger. Hello? Yes, 911, she said, talking fast. I need help. My neighbor has a fire in his yard, and it's dangerous. She was pacing back and forth now, her shoes making little thumps on the ground. She kept looking over the fence at me, like she wanted to make sure I heard her. I didn't move. I just sat there, watching her. The fire pit was still burning, nice and steady. The flames were small, but they lit up my yard with a warm glow. I could feel the heat on my hands and face, and it felt good. I wasn't breaking any rules. I'd checked the HOA book myself. Fires like this were okay as long as they were safe. Mine was safe. I had a bucket of water right next to me, just in case. Karen could call whoever she wanted. I wasn't worried. But she kept talking. Yes, it's an emergency, she told the person on the phone. He won't listen. He's just sitting there like nothing's wrong. She sounded so mad, her voice was almost squeaky. I could hear her breathing fast, like she was running out of air. You need to send someone now, she said. Then she hung up and shoved the phone back in her pocket. She crossed her arms and stared at me, her lips tight. They're coming, she said. You're in trouble now. I shrugged again. Okay, Karen, I said. My voice was quiet, not loud like hers. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just looked at her and smiled a little. That smile made her stop for a second. She tilted her head, like she wasn't sure what to think. What's so funny, she snapped. You think this is a joke? I didn't answer. I just kept smiling. Not a big smile, just a small one. The kind that says, I know something you don't. And I did. I knew something big. That secret I'd seen on my camera? It was like a bomb waiting to go off. Karen thought she was in charge right now, standing there yelling at me. She thought she could scare me with her phone call and her rules. But she didn't know what was coming. She didn't know I had something that could shut her up for good. Something that would make her wish she'd never messed with me. The night was still quiet, even with her yelling. The crickets were chirping, and the breeze was blowing soft and cool. My fire pit kept burning, the flames dancing like they didn't care about Karen at all. I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of my soda. It was cold and fizzy, and it tasted good. Karen was still standing there, watching me. Her face was all scrunched up, like she couldn't figure me out. You're gonna regret this, she said. When the police get here, you'll see. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. My eyes stayed on hers, steady and calm. She didn't like that. I could tell. She shifted her feet, like she was nervous but didn't want to show it. What's wrong with you? She asked. Why aren't you saying anything? I shrugged again. Nothing to say, I told her. That was true. I didn't need to say much. Not yet. The real talking would happen later, when my secret came out. Karen huffed and turned away for a second, like she was done with me. But then she spun back around. You think you're so smart, she said. Sitting there with that stupid fire. Well, you're not smart. You're breaking the rules, and I'm gonna prove it. She reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out her little HOA rule book. She held it up, shaking it at me. It's in here, she said. No fires. No danger. You're done. I looked at the book, then back at her. I read the rules, I said. It's fine. My voice was still calm, still quiet. Karen's face turned even redder. No, it's not, she shouted. You don't know what you're talking about. She flipped open the book and started reading out loud, her finger jabbing at the pages. No open flames bigger than this. No smoke that bothers people. You're breaking all of it. She was yelling so loud now, I bet the whole street could hear her. But I didn't care. I knew the rules. I'd checked them. My fire was small, and the smoke wasn't bothering anyone except Karen, maybe. She could yell all she wanted. She could read her book until her voice gave out. It didn't matter. Because I had something better than rules. I had that secret. And it was about to bite her. What do you think I saw? Any guesses? Drop 'em in the comments, I'll give you a hint soon. For now, just picture this, Karen standing there, yelling her head off, thinking she's winning. Me sitting by my fire, calm as can be, knowing she's about to lose big time. The night was still young, and things were just getting started. Stick around, you won't believe what happens next. Karen whipped out her phone and dialed 911 right there, screaming about my dangerous fire. She was standing by the fence, her feet planted hard on the ground like she was ready to fight. Her phone was big and shiny with that bright pink case she always had. She held it up to her ear with one hand and pointed at me with the other. Yes, hello, she yelled into the phone. There's a fire next door. It's dangerous. You need to come quick. Her voice was loud and sharp, cutting through the quiet night like a knife. She was so mad, her words came out fast and jumbled, like she couldn't get them out quick enough. I just sat back and watched. My chair was comfy, and the fire pit in front of me was still burning nice and steady. The flames were small, flickering orange and yellow, throwing little shadows on the grass. I had my soda in my hand, cold and fizzy, and I took a slow sip. Karen was going wild, but I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just kept my eyes on her, watching her yell and wave her arms. She looked like a crazy person, flapping around like a bird that couldn't fly. Her big green sweater flopped with every move, and those giant sunglasses slid down her nose a little. She didn't even notice. She was too busy screaming. But here's the thing, she didn't see the police car already parked down the street. Weird, right? I'd spotted it earlier that day, way before the sun went down. It was just sitting there, quiet and still, about 5 houses away. 2 cops were inside, their heads turned toward Karen's house. Not my house. Hers. I saw them when I went to grab the mail that afternoon. The car was black and white, with those big lights on top that weren't flashing yet. The windows were dark, but I could tell they were watching. They didn't move. They didn't get out. They just sat there, like they were waiting for something. I didn't know what it was then, but I had a feeling. A good feeling. Karen didn't see them. Not at all. She was too busy shouting into her phone. Yes, it's an emergency, she said. He's got a fire pit, and it's against the rules. He won't put it out. She kept pacing back and forth by the fence, her shoes making little thumps on the ground. Her short hair bounced with every step, and her face was redder than ever. She looked over at me every few seconds, glaring like she could make me disappear with her eyes. He's just sitting there, she told the person on the phone. He doesn't care. You need to send someone now. She was so loud, I bet the crickets stopped chirping just to listen. I didn't say a word, though. Not one. I let her rant and rave, waving her arms like a crazy person. She kept going, her voice getting higher and higher. It's dangerous, she shouted. The whole street could burn down. Do something. She pointed at my fire pit again, like it was some big monster. But it wasn't. It was just a little circle of bricks with a small fire inside. The flames weren't even that high, maybe as tall as a soda can. I had a bucket of water right next to me, too, just in case. I wasn't worried about the fire. And I wasn't worried about Karen, either. Why not? Because I knew something she didn't. Something big. Every shout she made was digging her hole deeper, and she had no clue. See, I'd seen her do something bad. Really bad. A week ago, late at night, I caught it all on my security camera. That little camera by my back door? It's tiny, but it sees everything. I was looking at the video, just checking to make sure nothing weird happened, and there she was. Karen. Sneaking around in the dark, doing something she shouldn't have been doing. I won't tell you what it was yet, that's coming later. But it was sneaky. And wrong. And I had it all saved, clear as day. She didn't know I had that video. She didn't know I'd seen her. To her, I was just the guy with the fire pit she wanted to boss around. She thought she could yell at me and call 911 and win. But she was wrong. So wrong. Every time she opened her mouth, she was making things worse for herself. And I knew it. That's why I just sat there, sipping my drink and smiling. This was gonna be good. Really good. Karen hung up the phone and shoved it back in her pocket. They're coming, she said, crossing her arms. You're in big trouble now. She stood there, staring at me over the fence. Her lips were tight, and her eyes were narrow. She looked so sure of herself, like she'd already won. You think you can just ignore me, she said. Well, you can't. The police are on their way, and they'll make you put that fire out. She nodded her head, like she was agreeing with herself. I didn't answer. I just took another sip of my soda and looked at her. The fire crackled in front of me, sending up a few tiny sparks. I tossed another stick in, and the flames jumped a little higher. Karen flinched, like she thought the fire was gonna jump out and get her. See, she yelled. That's dangerous. You're crazy. I smiled again, just a little smile, and leaned back in my chair. It's fine, Karen, I said. My voice was quiet, not loud like hers. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. She didn't like that. Not one bit. Fine, she snapped. It's not fine. You're breaking the rules, and I'm gonna prove it. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her little HOA rule book. It was small and blue, with a bunch of pages she'd marked with sticky notes. She held it up and shook it at me. It's in here, she said. No fires. No danger. You're done. She flipped it open and started reading, her finger jabbing at the words. No open flames bigger than this. No smoke that bothers people. You're breaking all of it. Her voice was so loud, I bet the whole neighborhood could hear her. But I didn't care. I'd read the rules. My fire was okay. It was small, and the smoke wasn't bothering anyone except Karen, maybe. She could yell all she wanted. She could wave her book around like a flag. It didn't matter. I wasn't scared of her rules. I wasn't scared of her phone call. I wasn't scared of anything. Because I had that secret. That video. And it was bigger than any rule she could find. Karen kept going. "You're gonna regret this," she said. "When the police get here, they'll shut you down. You'll see." She paced some more, back and forth, back and forth. Her shoes crunched on the grass, and her arms flapped like she was trying to fly away. "I've had enough of you," she shouted. "You think you're so smart, sitting there with that stupid fire. Well, you're not. You're in trouble now." She stopped and stared at me, waiting for me to say something. I didn't. I just looked at her. My face was calm, my eyes steady. I took another sip of my soda and set it down on the ground next to me. The fire pit glowed warm and bright, lighting up my yard. Karen huffed, like she was out of breath. "What's wrong with you?" she asked. "Why aren't you worried?" I shrugged. "No reason to be," I said. That was true. I wasn't worried. Not one bit. And here's why: those cops down the street. They weren't there for me. They were there for her. I didn't know everything yet, but I had a guess. See, when I saw that video of Karen doing something bad, I didn't just keep it to myself. I showed it to someone. Someone who could do something about it. I didn't tell Karen that, of course. She didn't need to know. Not yet. But I'd made a call a few days ago, and I had a feeling those cops were part of it. They weren't watching my house. They were watching hers. And now she'd called 911 herself. Funny, right? Karen didn't see it. She didn't know. She thought she was winning, standing there yelling at me. She thought the police were coming to help her. But every shout she made, every wave of her arms, was digging her hole deeper. She was loud, sure. She was mad, yeah. But she was blind. She didn't see the trap she was walking into. And I wasn't gonna tell her. Not yet. I just sat there, watching her, smiling. This was gonna be good. The night was still quiet, even with all her noise. The crickets chirped, and the breeze blew soft and cool. My fire kept burning, steady and warm. Karen was still pacing, still talking. "You're so smug," she said. "Sitting there like you don't care. Well, you'll care soon." She pointed at me again, her finger shaking. "The police are gonna make you stop. You'll see." She sounded so sure, so proud. Like she'd already won the fight. But she hadn't. Not even close. Those cops down the street. They were a clue. A big one. And I'd seen them. Karen hadn't. That's why I wasn't worried. That's why I could sit there, sipping my drink, smiling at her. She thought she was in charge, but she wasn't. Not tonight. Something big was coming, and she didn't even know it. What were those cops doing there? Why wasn't I worried? You're about to find out, don't blink. Just picture this, Karen yelling her head off, thinking she's got me beat. Me sitting by my fire, calm and quiet, knowing she's the one in trouble. The night was getting wild, and the best part was still coming. Stick around, you won't want to miss it. Karen was still going strong, pacing back and forth like a dog chasing its tail. Her voice was loud, bouncing off the houses around us. "You think you're so clever," she yelled. "Sitting there with that fire like it's no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. A huge deal." She stopped for a second and pointed at me again, her finger jabbing the air. "The police are coming, and they're gonna shut you down. You'll see." Her face was all scrunched up, like she'd just eaten something sour. She was madder than I'd ever seen her. I didn't move. I stayed right where I was, sitting by my fire pit. The flames were still small, crackling and popping in the dark. The warm glow lit up my yard, making little shadows dance on the grass. I had my soda in my hand, and I took another slow sip. It was cold and bubbly, and it tasted good. Karen was screaming, but I didn't care. I just watched her, my eyes calm and steady. She could yell all she wanted. It didn't bother me. Not one bit. She kept talking, her words spilling out like water from a broken faucet. I've lived here for years, she said. Years. And I've never seen anyone so rude. You think you can just move in and do whatever you want? No way. She shook her head hard, her short hair flapping around. This neighborhood has rules. Rules you don't follow. That fire is dangerous, and I'm not gonna let it slide. She crossed her arms and stared at me, like she was waiting for me to argue. But I didn't. I just shrugged again. It's fine, Karen, I said. My voice was soft, not loud like hers. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight. I had something better than words. I had that secret. That video. The one I'd seen on my security camera a week ago. Karen sneaking around, doing something bad. Something she didn't want anyone to know. I had it all saved, and she had no clue. That's why I wasn't worried. That's why I could sit there, calm and quiet, while she lost her mind. Karen huffed, like she was running out of air. Fine, she snapped. It's not fine. You're breaking the rules, and I'm gonna prove it. She reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out her little blue HOA rulebook again. She waved it at me, like it was some kind of magic wand. It's all in here, she said. No fires like that. No smoke. You're done. She flipped the book open and started reading out loud, her finger pointing at the words. No open flames bigger than 12 inches. No fires that make smoke that bothers people. You're breaking every single one. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and wild. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. The fire in front of me was small, way smaller than 12 inches. The smoke was light, drifting up into the sky, not bothering anyone. Well, maybe it bothered Karen, but that didn't count. I'd read the rules myself. I knew my fire pit was okay. She could wave her book all she wanted. She could read every page. It didn't matter. I wasn't breaking anything. But she didn't care about that. She just wanted to win. You're so smug, she said, her voice getting higher. Sitting there like you don't care. Well, you'll care soon. The police are on their way, and they'll make you stop. She started pacing again, her shoes crunching on the dry grass. Back and forth, back and forth. Her arms flapped like she was trying to fly. I've had enough of you, she shouted. You think you're better than everyone else? You're not. You're in big trouble now. She stopped and glared at me, her hands on her hips. I smiled a little, just a tiny smile. Not enough to make her mad, but enough to make her wonder. Okay, Karen, I said. I leaned back in my chair and tossed another stick into the fire. The flames jumped up a bit, crackling louder. Karen flinched again, like she thought the fire was gonna get her. See, she yelled. That's dangerous. You're crazy. I didn't answer. I just kept smiling. That little smile that said, I know something you don't. And I did. Those cops down the street? The ones I'd seen earlier? They were still there. I couldn't see them now, it was too dark, and they were too far away, but I knew they hadn't left. I'd spotted them that afternoon, sitting in their black and white car, watching Karen's house. Not mine. Hers. Two cops, just sitting there, quiet and still. Their lights weren't on, and they weren't moving. They were just waiting. Watching. I didn't know why then, but I had a guess. And it wasn't about my fire pit. Karen didn't see them. Not once. She was too busy yelling at me, waving her arms, pacing around. She didn't even look down the street. She didn't notice anything except me and my fire. You're gonna regret this, she said. When the police get here, they'll shut you down. You'll see. She nodded her head, like she was sure she was right. I've called them, and they're coming. You can't stop it now. She sounded so proud, like she'd already won the whole fight. But she hadn't. Every word she said, every shout she made, was digging her hole deeper. And she didn't even know it. See, that video I had. The one of her doing something bad? I didn't just keep it to myself. A few days ago, I showed it to someone. Someone who could do something about it? I didn't tell Karen, of course. She didn't need to know. Not yet. But I'd made a call, and I had a feeling those cops were part of it. They weren't there for me. They were there for her. And now she'd called 911 herself. Funny, right? She thought she was getting me in trouble, but she was really getting herself in trouble. I didn't say any of that out loud. I didn't need to. I just sat there, watching her. The fire pit glowed in front of me, warm and steady. The night was cool, and the breeze brushed my face every now and then. The crickets chirped, soft and steady, like they didn't care about Karen's noise. I took another sip of my soda and set it down on the ground. Karen was still going, still yelling. "You're so annoying," she said. Sitting there like nothing's wrong. Well, something's wrong. That fire's wrong. You're wrong. She pointed at me again, her finger shaking. I looked at her and shrugged. "It's my yard," I said. That's all I said. Simple. Quiet. Calm. Karen's face turned even redder, if that was possible. "Your yard," she snapped. "This is my neighborhood. I've been here longer than you. I make the rules around here." She waved her rule book again, like it was proof she was in charge. "You don't get to decide what's okay." "I do. And I say that fire's not okay." I didn't argue. I didn't need to. She could say whatever she wanted. She could think she was in charge. It didn't matter. Because I had that video. That secret. And it was bigger than her rules. Bigger than her yelling. Bigger than anything she could do. I knew it, and she didn't. That's why I wasn't worried. That's why I could sit there, sipping my drink, smiling at her while she ranted and raved. Karen kept going. "You're gonna be sorry," she said. "When the police get here, they'll tell you. They'll make you put that fire out. And then you'll have to listen to me." She nodded again, like she was sure it was gonna happen. "I've had enough of people like you. Thinking you can do whatever you want. Well, you can't. Not here. Not in my neighborhood." She paced some more, her shoes crunching louder now. I watched her, my eyes following her every move. She didn't see the trap she was walking into. She didn't see those cops down the street. She didn't know about the video. She didn't know anything. She thought she was winning, but she wasn't. Every shout, every wave of her arms, was making things worse for her. And I knew it. That's why I smiled. That's why I stayed calm. This was gonna be good. Really good. The fire crackled in front of me, sending up a few more sparks. I tossed another stick in, and the flames jumped a little higher. Karen flinched again, like she thought the fire was gonna fly out and burn her. "See," she yelled. "That's dangerous. You're crazy. You're gonna burn everything down." She waved her arms some more, her voice getting squeaky. "I'm not gonna let you do this. The police are coming, and they'll stop you." I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. My face was still calm, my eyes still steady. I took another sip of my soda and set it down. The night was quiet, except for Karen. The breeze blew soft and cool, and the crickets kept chirping. My fire pit glowed, warm and bright, lighting up my yard. Karen was loud, sure. She was mad, yeah. But she was blind. She didn't see what was coming. And I wasn't gonna tell her. Not yet. Those cops down the street? They were the key. They were watching her house, not mine. I didn't know everything yet, but I had a guess. That video I had. That call I made. It was all connected. Karen thought she was calling the police on me, but she didn't know they were already here. Already waiting. Already watching her. She thought she was digging my hole, but she was really digging her own. And it was getting deeper every second. Karen kept yelling. "You're so stupid," she said. "Sitting there like you don't care. Well, you'll care soon. The police are gonna make you stop. You'll see." She pointed at me again, her finger shaking harder now. "I've had enough of this. You're done. Done." She sounded so sure, so proud. Like she'd already won. But she hadn't. Not even close. I knew something she didn't. Something big. And it was about to change everything. I sat there, sipping my drink, smiling at her. The fire crackled, the night stayed quiet, and Karen kept digging. She had no clue. And that's what made it so good. What were those cops doing there? Why wasn't I worried? You're about to find out, don't blink. This was just the start. Things were gonna get wild, and Karen was gonna wish she'd never messed with me. Stick around, you won't believe what happens next. The sirens got closer, way closer now. They were loud, cutting through the quiet night like a big alarm. Karen's 911 call worked, I guess. I could hear the wail of the police cars coming down the street, getting louder every second. The sound bounced off the houses, making it feel like they were right on top of us. I was still sitting by my fire pit, the little flames crackling and glowing in front of me. The warm light lit up my yard, and the smoke drifted up into the dark sky. I had my soda in my hand, cold and fizzy, and I took a sip. Karen was standing by the fence, her arms crossed, looking at me with a big smirk on her face. Then I saw it, a second police car rolled up. It came slow at first, its red and blue lights flashing bright against the dark. The tires crunched on the road as it stopped right in front of my house. 2 officers hopped out, quick and sharp, like they meant business. Their uniforms were dark, with shiny badges on their chests that caught the light. They started walking straight toward my yard, their boots thumping on the ground. Karen's smirk got bigger. She crossed her arms tighter, like she'd just won some giant prize. "See," she crowed, her voice loud and proud. "I told you. They're here now. You're in big trouble." I didn't move. I stayed right where I was, sitting in my chair by the fire. The flames were small, dancing and popping like they didn't care about the sirens or the cops. I looked at Karen, then at the officers coming my way. She was so sure she'd won. She stood there, her head high, her eyes gleaming like she'd finally beat me. "I told you," she said again, pointing at me over the fence. "You can't have that fire. The police are gonna shut you down. You'll see." Her voice was full of glee, like this was the best moment of her life. But then something happened. The first cop, a tall guy with a serious face, stopped a few steps from me. He held up his hand, like he was telling everyone to wait. "Sir," he said, looking right at me. "Your fire's fine. We're not here for you." His voice was calm and clear, cutting through Karen's yelling like a knife. I looked up at him, still sitting in my chair. "My fire? Fine. Not here for me?" I nodded a little, like I understood. But inside, I was smiling. This was it. This was the moment. Karen's jaw dropped. Literally dropped. Her mouth fell open so wide, I could see her teeth in the dim light. Her eyes got big, like she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. "What?" she said, her voice squeaky now. "What do you mean, not here for him?" She uncrossed her arms and stepped closer to the fence, her hands flapping like she didn't know what to do with them. "He's got a fire. It's dangerous. I called you." She pointed at me again, her finger shaking. "He's the one breaking the rules." The second cop, a shorter guy with a clipboard in his hand, turned to her. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He just looked at her, his face all business. "Ma'am," he said, stepping toward the fence. "We need to speak with you. Now." His voice was firm, like he wasn't asking. He was telling her. Karen froze. Her hands stopped flapping, and her face went white as a ghost. All that red from yelling? Gone. She looked like she'd seen something scary, something she didn't expect. I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of my soda. The fire crackled in front of me, steady and warm. Karen stared at the cops, then at me, then back at the cops. "Me," she said, her voice small now. "Why me? I didn't do anything. He's the one with the fire." She pointed at me again, but her hand wasn't steady anymore. It wobbled, like she wasn't sure what was happening. "I called you. I'm the one who needs help." The first cop shook his head. "Ma'am, please step over here," he said, pointing to her side of the fence. "We've got some questions for you." Karen didn't move at first. She just stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Questions," she said. "What questions?" I didn't do anything wrong. Her voice was getting loud again, but it wasn't mad now. It was scared. She took a step back, away from the fence, like she wanted to run. But she didn't run. She couldn't. The second cop walked around to her yard, his clipboard still in his hand. "Ma'am," he said again. "Come with us. We need to talk." Karen's eyes darted around, like she was looking for a way out. But there was no way out. The cops were here, and they weren't leaving. Not without her. Here's the thing, those cops from earlier? The ones I'd seen down the street all day? They weren't random. They weren't just sitting there for no reason. They'd been watching her house. Not mine. Hers. All day long, those two cops in the black and white car had been parked 5 houses down, their eyes on Karen's place. I'd seen them when I got the mail that afternoon. Their lights were off, and they didn't move. They just watched. I didn't know why then, but I had a guess. And now I knew. They were here for her. Why? Because Karen had been breaking some serious rules. Big ones. Not little stuff like a fire pit or a trash can in the wrong spot. No, this was way worse. She'd been sneaking stuff she shouldn't have. Bad stuff. Stuff that could get her in real trouble. And I'd caught her. Not with my eyes, well, not at first. With my security camera. That little camera by my back door? It's tiny, but it sees everything. A week ago, late at night, I was checking the video, just looking to see if anything weird happened. And there she was. Karen. Sneaking around in the dark, doing something she didn't want anyone to know about. What was it? I'll tell you now. She was stealing. Not just little things, like a candy bar or a toy. Big things. Packages. Mail. Stuff that belonged to other people. I saw her on the video, creeping out of her house in a black hoodie, looking around to make sure no one was watching. She went to Mr. Jenkins' porch first, grabbed a box that was sitting there, and tucked it under her arm. Then she moved to the Carter family's house across the street, snagging a big envelope from their mailbox. She kept going, house to house, taking stuff like it was hers. Clear as day, right on my camera. I couldn't believe it at first. Karen. The loud lady with the rule book. Stealing. But there it was, all on video. She didn't know I had that camera. She didn't know it caught her. She thought she was sneaky, thought she'd gotten away with it. But she hadn't. I had proof. And I didn't just sit on it. A few days ago, I called the police. I told them what I'd seen. I sent them the video. I didn't tell Karen, of course. She didn't need to know. Not yet. But I tipped off the cops myself, and they'd been watching her ever since. That's why those cops were down the street all day. That's why they were here now. Karen thought she was busting me with her 911 call. She thought the police were coming to shut down my fire pit. But I'd already busted her. Days ago. And now it was all coming back to bite her. Karen's face was still white, her eyes big and scared. "What's going on?" she said, her voice shaking. "Why do you need to talk to me?" I didn't do anything. The first cop stepped closer to her yard, his hand resting on his belt. "Ma'am," he said. "We've got reports of theft in the neighborhood. We've been watching your house. We've got evidence." Karen's mouth fell open again. "Theft," she said. "Me? That's crazy. I didn't steal anything." The second cop held up his clipboard. "We've got video," he said. "From a security camera. Shows you taking packages and mail from other houses. Last week. Late at night." Karen's eyes went even wider, if that was possible. She looked at me, then back at the cops. "Video," she said. "What video?" I didn't. "I don't," her voice trailed off, like she didn't know what to say. I leaned back in my chair and smiled just a little. "My camera," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was loud enough for her to hear. Karen's head snapped toward me. "What?" she said. "Your camera? You?" She stared at me, her face all twisted up. "You did this? You called them?" I nodded. "Yup," I said. "Saw you stealing. Told the cops. Sent them the video." I took another sip of my soda, nice and slow. Karen's legs wobbled, like she might fall over. "No," she said. "No, that's not true. I didn't. I wasn't," but she couldn't finish. The cop stepped closer. "Ma'am," the first one said. "We need you to come with us. We've got questions, and we've got proof." Karen shook her head, hard. "No," she said. "This is a mistake. He's the one breaking rules. Not me." She pointed at me again, her hand shaking so bad it looked like it might fall off. The second cop shook his head. "His fire's fine," he said. "We checked. It's not against any rules. But you? We've got evidence on you. Let's go." He stepped toward her, and the first cop followed. Karen backed up, her eyes darting around. "No," she yelled. "This isn't fair. He's lying. There's no video." But the cops didn't stop. They kept coming, calm and steady. I sat there, watching it all. The fire pit glowed in front of me, the flames still dancing. The sirens from the second police car were quiet now, but the lights kept flashing, red and blue across the yard. Karen thought she was busting me. She thought her 911 call was gonna get me in trouble. She thought she was the big winner, standing there with her smirk and her rule book. But she was wrong. I'd busted her first. Days ago. With my camera. With my call. And now the cops were here not for me, but for her. Karen's voice got loud again. "This is crazy," she shouted. "I'm not a thief. I didn't do anything." But the cops didn't listen. They stepped into her yard, one on each side of her. "Ma'am," the first cop said. "Let's not make this harder. Come with us." Karen shook her head again, her hair flapping. "No," she said. "This is a mistake. He's the bad guy. Not me." She pointed at me one last time, her finger trembling. I looked at her and shrugged. "Told you my fire was fine," I said. That's all I said. Simple. Quiet. Calm. Karen's face twisted up even more, like she couldn't believe it. The cops took her arms gentle but firm and started leading her toward their car. "No," she yelled. "Let me go. This isn't right." But they didn't let go. They kept walking, slow and steady, taking her away. The fire crackled in front of me, warm and bright. I took another sip of my soda and leaned back in my chair. Karen thought she'd won. She thought she'd beat me. But she didn't. I'd seen her stealing. I'd caught her on video. I'd called the cops. And now she was the one in trouble, not me. The night was quiet again, except for her yelling as the cops walked her away. The crickets chirped, the breeze blew, and my fire kept burning. Who saw that coming? Tell me in the comments if you guessed it. Did you think Karen was gonna lose? Did you know I had a secret? This was the big moment, and it felt good. Really good. Stick around, there's more to tell. The cops were walking Karen away now, one on each side of her. She was still yelling, her voice loud and shaky as they led her toward the police car. "This isn't right," she shouted, twisting her head to look back at me. "Let me go. He's the bad guy. Not me." Her big green sweater flapped as she tried to pull away, but the cops held her arms gentle but strong. They didn't let go. The red and blue lights from the police car flashed across her yard, lighting up her scared face. Her giant sunglasses slipped down her nose, and her short hair was a mess, sticking out everywhere. She looked wild, like a trapped animal. I stayed right where I was, sitting by my fire pit. The flames were still small, crackling and glowing in the cool night air. The warm light danced across my yard, making little shadows on the grass. I had my soda in my hand, still cold, still fizzy, and I took a slow sip. The fire felt good on my face, and the smoke drifted up into the dark sky, thin and light. I watched the cops take Karen away, my eyes calm and steady. She was yelling, but I didn't care. Not one bit. This was her mess, not mine. Karen kept fighting as they walked her across her yard. "You've got the wrong person," she said, her voice high and squeaky. "I didn't do anything. He's the one with the fire. He's the one breaking rules." She pointed back at me, her hand shaking so hard it wobbled in the air. The first cop, the tall one with the serious face, shook his head. "Ma'am," he said, "we told you. His fire's fine. We're here for you." His voice was firm, like he wasn't gonna argue anymore. Karen's eyes got big, and her mouth opened wide, like she couldn't believe it. "Me," she said, her voice cracking. "Why me? I called you. I'm the good guy here." She yanked her arm, trying to pull free, but the second cop, the shorter one with the clipboard, held on tight. "Ma'am," he said, "stop moving. We've got evidence. We need to talk to you about stealing." Karen froze for a second, like his words hit her hard. "Stealing," she said, her voice small now. "I didn't steal anything. That's a lie." She shook her head fast, her hair flapping around. The first cop nodded. "We've got video," he said. "Shows you taking stuff from porches and mailboxes. Last week. At night." Karen's face went white again, whiter than before, if that was possible. She looked like a ghost standing there in the flashing lights. "Video," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What video?" "I didn't." "I don't," she couldn't finish. Her words just stopped, like she didn't know what to say anymore. I leaned back in my chair and smiled, just a little smile. "My video," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried across the yard. Karen's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide and wild. "What?" she said, staring at me. "Your video. You." She blinked fast, like she was trying to figure it out. "You did this? You called them?" I nodded, slow and easy. "Yup," I said. "Caught you on my camera. Stealing stuff. Told the cops. Sent them the video." I took another sip of my soda, nice and calm. Karen's legs wobbled, like she might fall right there. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, that's not true. I didn't. I wasn't." Her voice trailed off again, and she looked at the cops, then back at me. "You're lying," she shouted, her voice loud again. "There's no video. You made it up." She pointed at me, her finger trembling. "He's the bad guy. He's the one you should take. Not me." The second cop shook his head. "We've seen it," he said, holding up his clipboard. "Clear as day. You in a black hoodie, taking packages from porches, mail from boxes. It's all there." Karen's mouth fell open again, and she took a step back, but the cops didn't let her go. "No," she said. "That's not me. Someone else did it. He's framing me." She glared at me, her eyes full of fire now. "You did this. You set me up." I shrugged. "Nope," I said. "My camera doesn't lie." "You did it." "I just watched." I tossed another stick into the fire pit, and the flames jumped a little higher. The crackle was loud in the quiet night, and Karen flinched, like she thought the fire was laughing at her. "You're crazy," she yelled. "This is crazy. I didn't steal anything. I'm not a thief." But the cops didn't listen. They kept walking her toward the car, slow and steady. The first cop opened the back door of the police car. "Ma'am," he said, "get in. We need to take you to the station." Karen shook her head hard. "No," she shouted. "I'm not going. This is a mistake. Let me go." She pulled against them again, her feet dragging on the grass. But the cops were stronger. They guided her to the car, one hand on each arm. "You can tell us your side at the station," the second cop said. "But we've got the video. We've got proof." Karen's voice got louder. "Proof," she said. "What proof?" "He's lying. There's no video. I didn't do anything." She twisted around, looking at me over her shoulder. "You're gonna pay for this," she yelled. "You hear me? You're gonna regret this." Her face was all red now, not white anymore. She was madder than I'd ever seen her. But it didn't matter. The cops weren't here for me. They were here for her. They got her to the car, and the first cop put his hand on her head, guiding her into the back seat. "Watch your head," he said, calm and quiet. Karen didn't listen. She kept yelling, even as she ducked inside. "This isn't fair," she shouted. "He's the bad guy. Not me. You've got it all wrong." The second cop closed the door behind her, and her voice got muffled, but I could still hear her through the window. "Let me out. This is a mistake." I sat there, watching it all. The fire pit glowed in front of me, warm and steady. The flames danced like they were happy, crackling and popping in the night. I took another sip of my soda and leaned back in my chair. The police car's lights kept flashing, red and blue across the yard. Karen was in the back seat now, banging on the window with her hands. "Let me out," she yelled, her voice faint through the glass. "This isn't right." The first cop walked back toward me, stopping a few feet from my fire pit. "Sir," he said, "sorry for the trouble. Your fire's fine. We checked the rules. You're good." He nodded at me, like it was all settled. I nodded back. "Thanks," I said. "Appreciate it." He tipped his head a little, then turned and walked back to the car. The second cop was already there, getting into the front seat. They were done with me. They had what they came for, Karen. I looked over at her through the car window. She was still yelling, her hands pressed against the glass. "You're gonna pay," she shouted, glaring at me. This isn't over. But it was over. For her, at least. The cops started the car, and the engine rumbled low and deep. The sirens stayed off, but the lights kept flashing as they pulled away from the curb. Karen's face pressed against the window, her eyes locked on me until the car turned the corner and disappeared down the street. The night got quiet again. Real quiet. The crickets started chirping, soft and steady, like nothing had happened. The breeze blew cool across my yard, rustling the leaves on the big tree in the corner. My fire pit kept burning, the flame small and warm. I tossed another stick in, and it snapped loud in the silence. I leaned back in my chair and took a long sip of my soda. It tasted good, better than before, maybe. Everything felt good now. See, those cops from earlier? The ones down the street all day? They weren't random. They'd been watching Karen's house because of me. Because of that video. A week ago, I'd seen her sneaking around on my security camera. She was in that black hoodie, creeping from house to house, taking stuff that wasn't hers. Packages from porches. Mail from boxes. She thought no one saw her. She thought she was safe. But my camera caught it all, every step, every grab, every sneaky look around. Clear as day. I didn't let it slide. I couldn't. Stealing's wrong, and she'd been doing it for who knows how long. So a few days ago, I called the police. I told them what I'd seen. I sent them the video. They didn't come right away, they watched her first. That's why those cops were down the street all day. They were waiting, checking, making sure. And then Karen called 911 herself, thinking she'd get me in trouble for my fire pit. She didn't know they were already here for her. She didn't know I'd tipped them off. She didn't know I'd busted her first. Karen thought she was smart. She thought she was in charge, standing there with her smirk and her rulebook. She thought her 911 call was gonna shut me down. But it didn't. It backfired. Big time. I'd caught her stealing. I'd told the cops. And now they had her. Not me. Her. The fire pit was fine. I was fine. She was the one in the back of that police car, yelling and banging on the window as they drove her away. The street was empty now. The police car was gone, and the flashing lights faded into the dark. My yard was quiet, just me and the fire. The flames glowed warm and bright, like they were happy with how things turned out. I set my soda down on the ground and stretched my arms out. The night felt good, better than it had all week. Karen was gone, and I was still here, sitting by my fire pit, enjoying the peace. Who saw that coming? Tell me in the comments if you guessed it. Did you think Karen was gonna get caught? Did you know I had a secret up my sleeve? This was the big moment, the twist that flipped everything around. Karen thought she was busting me, but I'd already busted her. And it felt awesome. Stick around, there's more to tell about what happened next. The cops walked Karen back to her house, their boots thumping on the grass. She was between them, one officer on each side, holding her arms tight but not too hard. I could hear her yelling as they moved across her yard, her voice loud and mad at first. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, twisting her head to look at them. "I'm the victim here. You've got it all wrong." She sounded so sure, like she still thought she could talk her way out of it. Her big green sweater flapped as she tried to pull away, and her short hair bounced around her face. She was a mess, but she kept going, her words spilling out fast. I stayed where I was, sitting by my fire pit. The flames were still small, crackling and glowing in the dark. The warm light lit up my yard, making little shadows on the grass. I had my soda in my hand, cold and fizzy, and I took a sip, watching them go. The night was quiet now, except for Karen. The crickets chirped soft and steady, and the breeze blew cool across my face. My fire pit felt good, warm, and cozy, like nothing could ruin this moment. And nothing did. Karen kept yelling as they got closer to her house. "Let me go," she said. "This is a mistake. He's the bad guy. Not me." She pointed back at me, her hand shaking in the air. The cops didn't stop, though. They kept walking, slow and calm, like they'd heard it all before. Then the tall cop, the one with the serious face, reached into his belt and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. They were shiny and silver, glinting in the light from the police car. He held them up, and Karen's voice stopped. Just like that. It got real quiet. Her eyes got big, and her mouth fell open, but no words came out. She stared at the handcuffs like they were something scary, something she didn't expect. "What?" she said, her voice tiny now. "Handcuffs? For me?" The second cop, the shorter one with the clipboard, nodded. "Ma'am," he said, "you're under arrest. We've got proof you've been stealing." He held the clipboard tight, like it was full of secrets about her. Karen shook her head fast. "No," she said. "That's not true. I didn't steal anything." But her voice wasn't loud anymore. It was small and shaky, like she knew she was in trouble. The tall cop took one of her arms and clicked the handcuffs around her wrist. The sound was sharp, click, click, and Karen flinched, like it hurt. "This isn't fair," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm not a thief. You've got the wrong person." The second cop took her other arm and clicked the handcuffs shut. Now her hands were stuck behind her back, and she couldn't move them. She twisted a little, like she wanted to get free, but the cops held on. "Let's go," the tall cop said, and they started walking her toward her front door. I watched it all from my chair. The fire pit glowed in front of me, warm and steady. I took another sip of my soda and leaned back, feeling good. Karen's yelling got quieter as they walked her away. "This is ridiculous," she said one more time, but it wasn't loud now. It was weak, like she was giving up. The cops didn't answer. They just kept going, their boots thumping on her porch steps. They opened her front door, and then they were gone inside her house with her. The door shut behind them, and the night got quiet again. Turns out, Karen had been up to some shady stuff. Really shady stuff. Not just little things, like forgetting to follow a rule or two. No, this was big. She'd been stealing packages and messing with people's mail. For weeks, maybe months, she'd been sneaking around at night, taking things that didn't belong to her. Boxes from porches. Letters from mailboxes. Stuff that people were waiting for, presents, clothes, important papers. She took it all, like it was hers to keep. And she thought no one would catch her. But I did. My camera caught it all. That little security camera by my back door? It's small, but it sees everything. A week ago, I was checking the video, just looking to see if anything weird happened. And there she was, Karen, in a black hoodie, creeping around in the dark. She went to Mr. Jenkins' house first, grabbing a box from his porch. Then she hit the Carter family's mailbox across the street, pulling out a big envelope. She kept going, house to house, taking stuff like a sneaky thief. Clear as day, right on my camera. I couldn't believe it at first. Karen. The loud lady who loved rules. Stealing. But the video didn't lie. She was there, plain as anything, doing something bad. So I didn't just sit there. I called the police a few days ago. I told them what I'd seen. I sent them the video. They didn't come right away, they watched her first, checking to make sure. That's why those cops were parked down the street all day, keeping an eye on her house. And then Karen called 911 herself, thinking she'd get me in trouble for my fire pit. She didn't know they already had proof, my proof. The police had everything they needed to bust her. My fire pit? Totally legal. I'd checked the rules myself. The HOA, the group that makes rules for our neighborhood, says you can have a fire pit as long as it's small and safe. Mine was small, just a little circle of bricks with tiny flames. I kept a bucket of water nearby, too, just in case. The cops looked at it when they got here, and they said it was fine. No problem at all. Karen's little power trip? Trying to boss me around and shut me down? That was over. Totally over. She'd lost, and I'd won. The next day, the neighborhood was buzzing. I woke up early, the sun shining bright through my window. My fire pit was still there in the backyard, cold now, with little bits of ash inside. I stepped outside to grab the mail, and people were already talking. Mr. Jenkins was out watering his flowers, his old hat pulled low over his eyes. He saw me and waved, a big smile on his face. "Hey," he called. "Heard what happened last night? Good job." I waved back. "Thanks," I said, smiling a little. The Carter family was out, too. The kids were riding their bikes up and down the street, laughing and yelling like always. Mrs. Carter was on her porch, sipping coffee. She looked over and gave me a thumbs up. "You're a hero," she said. "Karen's been taking our stuff for weeks. We didn't know it was her." I nodded. "Glad it's over," I said. She grinned. "Me too. Thanks for catching her." The kids zoomed by on their bikes, shouting, "You're awesome," as they passed. I laughed and waved at them. Everywhere I went, people were talking. The lady down the street, Mrs. Lopez, was out walking her dog. She stopped when she saw me. "Is it true?" she asked. "Karen got arrested?" I nodded. "Yup," I said. "Caught her stealing on my camera." Mrs. Lopez's eyes got big. "Wow," she said. "I lost a package last month. Bet it was her." She shook her head. "You did good. Real good." I smiled. "Thanks," I said, and she kept walking, her little dog trotting beside her. The whole neighborhood was like that. People waved at me from their yards. They smiled from their windows. They stopped me on the sidewalk to say thanks. "You're the man," one guy yelled from his garage. "Took care of that loud lady." Another neighbor, an old guy with a cane, tipped his hat at me. "Knew she was trouble," he said. "Good work, kid." Everywhere I turned, people were happy. They acted like I was some kind of hero, and it felt pretty cool. And Karen? She didn't show her face for a while. Her house was quiet that day. The curtains were closed, and her car stayed in the driveway. No yelling. No pacing. No pointing fingers. She was gone off with the cops the night before. I didn't know where she was exactly. Maybe at the police station. Maybe somewhere else. But she wasn't here, bossing people around or waving her rule book. Her little power trip was done, and the neighborhood felt lighter without her noise. I went back to my yard later that day. The sun was high, and the air was warm. My fire pit sat there, just like always. I brushed some ash out of it and added a few new sticks. That night, I lit it again. The flames came up small and steady, glowing in the dark. I sat in my chair, sipping a new soda, and watched the fire dance. The crickets chirped, the breeze blew, and everything was peaceful. No Karen. No yelling. Just me and my fire pit, totally legal and totally mine. How's that for a twist? Justice feels good, doesn't it? Karen thought she could shut me down, but she got shut down instead. My camera caught her. The cops took her. And the neighborhood was happy again. People waved at me like I was a hero, and I guess I was, in a way. I didn't plan it like that, I just wanted her to stop stealing. But it worked out, and it felt awesome. Real awesome. So, here's the thing, sometimes the loudest person in the room is hiding the most. That's what I learned from all this craziness with Karen. She was loud, really loud. She yelled a lot, pointed her finger, and acted like she was the boss of everything. She thought she could push me around, tell me what to do, and scare me with her rules and her 911 call. She stood there by my fence, shouting about my fire pit, thinking she was big and strong. But she didn't know something. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't know I had a secret. And she never saw me coming. Think about that for a second. Karen was all noise and bark, like a dog that won't stop yapping. She waved her little blue rulebook and called the cops, sure she'd win. She thought she was smarter than me, tougher than me, better than me. But here's the funny part, she was hiding something big. All that yelling? All that bossing? It was like a mask. A mask to cover up what she was really doing, sneaking around, stealing stuff, breaking rules way worse than a little fire pit. She was loud on the outside, but sneaky on the inside. And I caught her. I didn't yell back. I didn't fight her with big words or mad faces. I just sat there by my fire, sipping my soda, staying quiet. I let her bark and bark, digging her own hole. And when the cops came, it wasn't for me, it was for her. My cameras saw everything. My video showed the truth. The quiet guy me flipped the whole game. Karen thought she was the winner, but she lost. Big time. And that's what I want you to think about. Maybe next time you meet someone who's all loud and pushy, you'll wonder. What are they hiding? Why are they making so much noise? Sometimes the people who talk the most, who act the biggest, are the ones with secrets. They bark loud so you don't look too close. They push you around so you don't push back. But if you stay sharp, if you watch and wait, you might see what's really going on. That's what I did with Karen. I stayed quiet, I watched, and I won. It's kind of cool when you think about it. The loud ones don't always win. Sometimes the quiet ones, the ones who don't make a fuss, have the real power. I didn't need to shout or wave my arms. I didn't need to call her names or get mad. I had my camera, my video, and my plan. That was enough. Karen never saw it coming, and that's what made it so good. She thought she was in charge, but I flipped everything around. The quiet guy beat the loud lady, and justice happened. So, stay sharp out there, friends. Keep your eyes open. Don't let the loud ones trick you. Sometimes they're just noise, big, empty noise. The real stuff, the important stuff, might be hiding with the quiet ones. The ones who don't talk much, who don't show off. Like me, sitting by my fire pit, sipping my soda, waiting for the right moment. That's where the game can change. That's where the surprises happen. And when they do, it feels awesome. Think about your own life. Have you ever met someone loud like Karen? Someone who's always telling you what to do, acting like they're the best? Maybe a kid at school who brags a lot. Or a grown-up who yells too much. Next time you see them, wonder about it. What's behind all that noise? Are they hiding something? Are they scared you'll figure them out? You don't have to yell back. You don't have to fight. Just watch. Wait. Be sharp. You might be the one to flip the game, just like I did. Karen thought she had me. She stood there, smirking, calling the cops, sure she'd shut my fire pit down. She thought she was the big dog, and I was just some little guy she could boss around. But I had something she didn't expect. I had proof. I had truth. And when the cops showed up, they didn't care about my fire, they cared about her stealing. Her loud voice didn't save her. Her rules didn't help her. My quiet plan did the trick. And that's a lesson worth remembering. It's not about being the loudest. It's not about looking big or tough. It's about what's real. What's true. Karen hid behind her yelling, but I found her out. I stayed calm, I stayed smart, and I let the truth do the talking. That's why she's gone now, off with the cops, and I'm still here, sitting by my fire pit, enjoying the night. The loud one fell, and the quiet one stood tall. Pretty cool, right? So, what do you think? Did Karen get what she deserved? I say yes. She stole stuff. She broke rules. She pushed people around. And then she tried to push me, but I pushed back quietly. The cops took her away, and the neighborhood's happy again. People wave at me now, like I'm a hero. And I guess I am, in a way. Not because I'm loud or big, but because I was sharp. I saw what she was hiding, and I did something about it. Justice feels good, doesn't it? Like a warm fire on a cool night, steady, strong, and right. Let me know below, what do you think? Did you like how this turned out? Was Karen wrong to act so big and loud? Did she deserve to get caught? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I want to hear them. And if you liked this story, give it a thumbs up. It was a wild ride, wasn't it? From Karen yelling at me to the cops taking her away, it's a tale about noise, secrets, and winning the quiet way. I had fun telling it, and I hope you had fun listening. This isn't the end, either. There's always more stories out there, more loud people, more quiet heroes, more twists to come. So stick around, friends. Keep watching. Keep wondering. The next time you hear someone barking loud, think of Karen. Think of me. And ask yourself, who's really got the power? Sometimes it's the quiet ones who change everything. See you in the next one.